Great. We'll call this meeting back to order. Bill is going to be a little bit late, and we've reached the time we need to begin. With the council's permission, we're jumping over item 11 to item 12, what's referred to as the drought panel. And I want to describe it this way before I turn it over to Dan. The title that's on our agenda refers to a report on dry year conditions and so on. We had a press release that went out yesterday highlighting this particular panel, and it was titled Balancing the State's Co-Equal Goals During a Drought. And I think that really is a better description, given that this is the first time the state of California has encountered a drought under the co-equal goals laws and regulations. So with that, Dan Ray, our Chief Deputy, will be handling the panel. Thank you, Dan.
And let me introduce our panel to you as well. You mentioned Bill Croyle, who will be joining us shortly. He's the DWR's recently named drought manager. In fact, his challenge in getting here, he's been in a meeting of the drought task force with his colleagues on the task force. Craig Wilson's with us. He's the State Water Resources Control Board's water master, and they have an important role in the dry year response. From the Bureau of Reclamation, we've got Elizabeth Kiddick, who's in their operations, Central Valley Project Operations Office, and she can talk a little about how they're trying to manage through the drought, even today having to make adjustments probably as we speak to try to manage for fish and wildlife needs as well as meet their customers' needs. And then Tom Goring's here. Tom is a colleague of many of us from our CalFed days, but more recently he's found a more legitimate employment perhaps with the Water Forum in Sacramento, which is a regional collaborative trying to manage water supplies here. I thought I'd start with just a reminder of the hearings we held back in June and July and August of last year, when you heard from representatives of DWR and the Water Board, as well as some local water agencies about the effects of last year's dry year and how we were trying to manage through that, and the impacts both on ag and urban water users as well as on the Delta ecosystem. You know, at that time, anxious that there might be continued problems, we promised to report back to you regularly. I recall some council members at the time saying, we should have more urgency. We should be convening a drought task force and getting ready for the worst. But I think many of us had our eyes on the clouds and were hoping maybe we would get some relief through rains and other benefits. But sadly now, as we enter a new year, the drought that we feared is upon us. You know, the last year's been one of the driest in records. We don't see any storms on the horizon that are going to significantly relieve these conditions. And the most worrisome part is that worse may be yet to come, and especially in regions where folks haven't done everything they can to diversify their water supplies and use water as efficiently as they can and improve storage, where use all the tools of our ag and urban water management programs to match their water demands to the supply that is available. We have to really worry about the conditions they'll see over the coming months. And of course, the Delta ecosystem is also in stress. We heard this morning about the sorry condition of its fisheries. And those of us who are able to read regional papers see the damage that's being done to our anadromous fish. So what we're trying to do with this series of briefings, building on the ones we had last year, is give you information to help improve our understanding of current conditions and how they may impact the Delta and its co-equal goals of our program. Randy, you've always pointed out that that's an interesting new facet of this drought, is it's the first time when we've clearly got these responsibilities to both protect the ecosystem and meet the needs of water users as we struggle through this dry period. We're hoping that through this series of conversations, we might identify some actions that we could encourage to improve the reliability of water supplies or protect the Delta ecosystem either now or maybe in future years. We put together this panel a couple weeks ago without knowing that when the governor was going to issue his drought declaration, but now it's been out for a few days. It's interesting if you look at it, what's gotten the most headlines has been his call on Californians to reduce their water usage by 20%. and his direction to the State Department of Water Resources to execute a statewide water conservation campaign to help achieve that. But many of the other provisions of the declaration echo elements of the Delta Plan. He's called on the local urban water suppliers to implement their local water storage contingency plan, and of course that was one of the things that we recommended in the Delta Plan, was improving those contingency plans to deal with interruptions of supplies out of the Delta. He's called on state agencies to immediately implement improved water conservation actions, echoing the Delta Plan's recommendation that state agencies in their operation and construction of their buildings should be models of smart water use. He's called on DWR and the State Water Board to work together to expedite the processing of water transfers, and made some suggestions to the Water Board in ways that can facilitate that, again echoing recommendations that are in the Delta Plan. There's going to be accelerated funding to help enhance local water supplies, and they're going to repurpose some unspent funds to enable near-term water conservation projects. Water Board's going to improve or increase its oversight of water rights to make sure that they're managed properly. Importantly, one of the things the declaration does is it directs the board to consider modifying some of its water quality rules to help provide a little flexibility for the projects that they try to operate through this year. And the governor's waived the two provisions of state law to make that more feasible. One would be a provision of the Water Code, and the other would be the California Environmental Quality Act, as it applies to those actions during the duration of the drought. The drinking water program I guess it's at the Water Board now, is going to be working hard to provide technical and financial assistance to small communities who've got problems with drinking water supplies. DWR is going to enhance its work on groundwater so that we have a better sense on impacts to aquifers as groundwater use probably increases during this drought to compensate for lost surface supplies. Food and Ag is going to get busy trying to help growers connect up with the services that are available. And then, in a reflection of the two goals, Fish and Wildlife has been directed to be more active in managing impacts on threatened species and develop contingency plans for their wildlife areas and refuges, and consider restricting fishing in areas that have got low water supplies. And there's other actions that will be taken as well. The Drought Task Force is going to continue to be active throughout this period, including planning for emergency food supplies in areas where agricultural workers may not find much employment, and making other recommendations to the governor as it's needed. So I think with that, why don't we turn it over to Craig, and he can talk about what the Water Board's activities would be, and then maybe Bill will be up next, and he can circle back to him.